and all the time. Amen. You know, I took a big gamble this week. I don't normally gamble. I was debating. I wasn't sure if Marvin was going to be here, so I wasn't sure if I should do a 20-minute sermon or a regular sermon. And then Pastor Smith didn't tell me that he was going to be here, so I took the risk, and it's not the 20-minute sermon. So I apologize to Marvin. You know, it was a risk I was willing to take. So, anyways, it's so good to be here with you guys this morning. We are grateful for the opportunity to share with you guys again this morning. We do have a PowerPoint presentation. I do have some scripture I would like for you to kind of follow with me on your Bible if you can. That'd be great. But I'm going to try this. Apparently there's a new software where I can actually manipulate the slides with my phone. We're going to give that a shot. Worst case scenario, I'll flip over to our trusty clicker here, but we'll try the phone option here just to see. Let me do a little test. Oh, nice. Wonder if this app can also write my sermons. Probably not. But anyways, again, we're glad to be here. Since the last time I've been here, it's been an extremely busy time for me and my family. We've been trying to do various projects with our young people and various ministries, trying to be involved, and of course with the communications. And I would like to say that if you're not on our conference e-newsletter list, I'd like to encourage you. Just go to our website, okadventist.org, and just sign up. And we send out a monthly report of things that are going out in the conference, whether it's the camp, whether it's the executive committee making decisions, whether it's just things that are happening in various churches, just to keep you in the loop, both things that are coming up and things that have passed. So we want you to be in the loop. We want you to be informed and to be able to know what's going on in your church. This is your church, your conference, so we definitely want you to know, not just here locally, but throughout the entire state. You can be praying for us, working with us, whatever is going on. We want you to be involved and to be participating. With that said, we do have a work bee that's coming up on the 19th of this month at Wewoka Woods. We're getting ready for the summer. We got all these camps that are going to take place for summer camp and then camp meeting, etc. So we want to invite you as a church to go and be there. There's work for everybody. So if you can take a few hours off Sunday to help and be a blessing to the camp, we would love for you to be there. And I greatly would appreciate any help that I could get as we prepare to get our summer camp programs running. All right, so this morning, as you can see, the title is Growing Young Churches, helping young people discover and love your church. We want people not just to attend church, we want people to love church, that when they don't come to church, they just don't feel right. That when they miss out, whether they're just staying home or traveling, like, man, I really miss church because I love church. So that's the kind of environment we want to build and brew here at this church, and I'm sure at every church, but we're talking about First Tulsa today, and we want that to be a reality, not just wishful thinking or an idea that we might have. And so a lot of things that I'm going to share today are applicable not just to youth and young adults, so that is my focus. That's that's the references that I'm going to be making. But this message is very much applicable to any new person, any newcomer, any person who has left the church and we're trying to bring them back in. These are basic foundational principles that are applicable to making sure that our church continues to grow, and not just grow, but grow young, right? We love older people, but we love the younger people too, right? We love the younger people, but it doesn't exclude the old. We want to grow young as a church collectively, right? Holistically. You know, one of my favorite passages in the book of Revelation is the one we find in chapter 14, verse 6, where it says, "And I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach or to proclaim to everyone who dwells on earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people." And I would like to add as a parenthesis, including children, youth, and young adults. We are to preach the gospel message. You know, when I used to think of that passage, in my mind, I didn't exclude the young people or the children, but my mind would always imagine, as you're reading scriptures and you're envisioning and you're imagining, you know, what it's saying, I would always imagine adults, grown-ups, older folks. That was just kind of the natural thought that came to mind. I wasn't excluding the younger people, but they weren't part of the picture. They were just kind of maybe an afterthought. my thought was always the older people. But as I read that passage time after time, and it's inclusive of everybody, it's not exclusive of anybody, everyone is included, which of course counts children, youth, and young adults. So we as a church have a great responsibility of sharing the gospel message even to the young people, even to the children. Let me see. Well, actually, I was going to try this, right? Yes. So there's a book called Growing Young. I don't know, maybe you guys have heard about it, read about it. It's based, what I'm sharing today, a lot of the stuff is based off of the things that we find in this book. Practical things, very simple, nothing that's going to be earth-shattering. These are things that if you think about it, you say, oh, yeah, well, that's common sense. But we just simply don't always think about them. So Max Dupree said, the first job of leaders is to do what? Define reality. Now, if you're a principal at a school, if you're a business owner, if you're leading a church, if you're leading a group, if you're leading any organization, you have to be able to define what reality is. Because if you don't define reality, you can never really fix a problem. You can never really find a solution because you don't even know what the problems are. So it's important from the onset on any organization, including the church, that we're able to define what? Reality, to define reality. And this is a quote that we find in this particular book. The unfortunate reality is that most churches are not what? They're not growing, and they're not getting any younger. Let's just face it. Not just the Seventh-day Adventist church, but the Christian church in general, which includes the Seventh-day Adventist church, is facing this terrible situation where most churches, the majority, there's a few exceptions, but the majority of the churches are getting older, and that's good because you as an individual you want to get old, but as a church you don't want to get old, right? We need to face this reality. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that 1 in 2, so 50%. Just think about it this way: if you see all the young people that are here today, right, all the little children, all the little ones, 50% of them, young people will drift away from God or their faith after age 18. That's a very sad thing. These are Christian people, children in Christian homes. Which of the kids that are here, which half would you say, oh, these are the ones who are okay that they drift away? Not a single one, right? I mean, to think that one of the children that was up here in Children's Story, that the ratio is, the percentages are that half of those kids, by the time they turn 18, they're going to leave their faith. I don't know about you, but that breaks my heart. To even think of that concept, to even think of that idea. So for that reason, we have to be extremely intentional about how we do ministry in our church. Look at this statistic right here. Very interesting. So they did a survey back in 2007 and back in 2014, right? They're going to be doing another one in a few years, but 78% of people, back in 2007, I'm on the left top side there, 78% of people identified as Christians. 7 years later, only 71% of people surveyed identified as Christians. And quite the opposite on the other side, the nuns, the N-O-N-Es, right, the religiously unaffiliated, it used to be 16% in 2007. That has now grown to 23%. In other words, in this country, this nation, we are becoming more and more secular day by day and year by year. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like 7 years from those dates. It's not getting better, guys. It's getting worse. So if we can face and we can recognize what the issue is, what the problem is, then we need to say, all right, here is the situation, here is the reality, what can we do? What shall we do? A lot of our churches, like I said, nothing wrong with gray heads. We love gray head people. We love regular hair people. We love all kinds of people. But eventually, if you don't bring young blood or if you don't keep the young people there, eventually the pews start to get empty, right? And as time goes, then church, one of the sad things that's happening throughout Adventist, including the Seventh-day Adventist Church, is that churches are closing down. They're closing down. It's happening in our conference, in our union, in our division. In this nation, this is a trend in the Christian churches. And there's few exceptions. Look at this quote here by John Freeman. He was the North Pacific Union president. This is what he said. We can no longer ignore statistics. that show our Seventh-day Adventist denomination is aging. Older, wiser members are precious to our church, that's the truth there, and essential to our God-given mission. We don't exclude them. We want them to be part of the church, right? However, we have a generational crisis that is not adequately being addressed. We are failing to what? To adequately what? Incorporate youth and young adults into church ministry and mission. It's a general statement, right? But it's a true statement. We're not incorporating. See, the idea is not just simply doing stuff for the children and for the youth and for the young adults. That's nice that, we want to do those things. We want to do things that minister to them specifically. But we're talking about incorporating them, making this their church, not your church. We want it to be their church. Look at this. Your church needs young people, and they need your church. Amen? One without the other is incomplete. We need each other, like a family. We're studying about family this quarter, right? Family needs each other, right? Young people, look at this. This is a very interesting quote that I found. Young people leave the churches they never belonged to as children. See, they leave the church because, Dad, Mom, that was never really my church. That was your church. I went and I sat and I listened. That's about it. Saw all these people doing things. It was great show sometimes, whatever. But it wasn't their church. They didn't feel like they belonged. They weren't incorporated into the ministry, into the program. They might have done things for them, to them, but they weren't the ones in the middle. So what does the future of your church, of the First Tulsa Church look like? What is the plan? What is the vision to growing this church young? Growing it in general, yes, but especially growing young. What are the conversations that are being had in your boardroom? What are the conversations that are being had in your hallways or in your pastor's office to say, how can we incorporate our young people into our church? I'm sharing this message, not knowing what's going on. I'm just asking the questions. You guys, as we're listening here, can decide what areas maybe you're doing and you're doing great and you're strong in, and what areas maybe you're a little weak and you can improve on a little bit more. Now, most of you here know, but here, of course, is my family. This is right before we left Indianapolis to come to back to Oklahoma. You got Benjamin there on my left. My left from here, right on the picture. And then between me and my wife is Isaac. They're sitting right over here, right? Glad they're not making a lot of noise. That's great. So I'm interested in this subject not just because I am the youth director for the Oklahoma Conference. That's secondary. I am passionate about this because I have 2 kids. I look at that statistic that I saw earlier, and if I'm not intentional, by the time my kids turn 18, one of my 2 precious children might not be in the church. How do you think I feel about that? And that's how we need to look at our young people. Even if they're not your specific children, if you didn't bear those kids and you're not paying to raise them and all these things, they're still your children because you're part of the church. We're all a family. And should be passionate, it should be concerned, and should be intentional, not just about saying that we care about young people, but actually doing something and actually making them feel like this is their church. 7 qualities that your church doesn't need in order to grow young. Sometimes we think, to have young people, we need this or we need that. And these are just myths. They're fallacies. It's not a specific size that, if I had 1,000 people in my church, if I had 500 or whatever. No, it doesn't have to do with size. It doesn't have to be in a trendy location. It doesn't need a big modern building or something super fancy. You don't need a big budget or contemporary worship service, which is the one that people usually think, we had contemporary special music and we did this. And if you do it, it shouldn't be because you're thinking that that's going to attract the young people in itself. And it might attract them, but it's not going to keep them. A watered-down teaching style, and a hyper-entertaining ministry program. As this book did the research, they visited churches that were doing it right and were growing young. And these weren't necessarily elements that were part of what was necessary for that church to grow young. These are myths. There's more to it. There's something more real, more practical that comes into play when we're talking about growing young. And so these six core commandments that we're going to be mentioning here, if you study the book of Acts and you look at the apostolic church, the very start of the church, you will find that these are just pretty obvious. Like, oh, these elements are actually there as you study the church when it started out. Very basic, simple, and straightforward. Growing young isn't about changing youth ministry. It's about what? Changing church culture. So it's not like, oh, if we do this one youth program, that's what we have to do. Or if we're going to do this one thing for the kids over here, or whatever. No, it's about the culture of the church. It's about how you guys think and process when you're making decisions for the church. Now, if you have your Bibles, share it with me for a second. The book of John. The book of John. The part of this passage it's right before Jesus made this huge declaration of, I am the bread of life. And it began with this narrative. This is the backdrop to him eventually getting to the point of saying, I am the bread of life. So if you turn to the book of John, chapter 6, and I want you just to notice a couple of things here. We're talking about young people. So I want to make reference to this passage here. John chapter 6, verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw a miraculous sign he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on the mountainside, and he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. Verse 5. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? If you look at some of the other Gospels, he actually says that he had compassion for them and asked that question, how are we going to feed these people? So Jesus is concerned about the people, right? And he is now connecting with his disciples and bringing them into the conversation to find a solution, right, to be able to feed hundreds and thousands of people, right? He brings them into the problem-solving here meeting. He asked this only to test him. Now, I want you to read this part. For he already had in mind what he was going to do. Now, we're going to pause there before we go on to the verse. We know, because we've read the story hundreds of times, right? We've heard it children's story in Sabbath school, etc. We know what he had in mind was to utilize the bread of this kid, child, young person, right? So he knew ahead of time. So now he was just seeing if the disciples were going to work with him in utilizing this young person. Because the Bible says Jesus already had a plan. He knew that there was this young person out in the crowd with some bread and fishes. Jesus knew this beforehand. And maybe by the guidance of the Holy Spirit, right, his mom or he himself or whatever prepared it, because Jesus already had this plan. He was going to show the people what he could do. He was going to show them compassion, show them his power, etc., etc. And he had in mind to use this young boy. Before he even left his house, before he even got up that morning, Jesus had a plan to use that kid. So he says he already had a plan. Verse 7, Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, he what? He spoke up. So he spoke up for this young person. Sometimes we just need church members to speak up for our young people. To say, hey, look at here. So it says that Andrew spoke up. And this is what he said. Here. He didn't say over there. He didn't say over on that back row or on that end of the crowd or somewhere in the middle of the congregation. Andrew had actually gone through the trouble, brought this young, he went and looked for him, found him, brought him, had a conversation, I'm sure, prior to, brought him to Jesus, and he said to him, am I moving too much? And he said to him, here is a boy with 5 loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many? I love this picture. I love this imagery. Why do I like it? There's a pointer here, I think, right? See, you have a kid, a young person, right? Be a young adult, whatever you want it to represent. He has something, right? Something that he's going to give to Jesus. And he is here in front of Jesus because somebody brought him to Jesus and said, in essence, is saying, hey, we know you don't have much, but let me bring you to Jesus, see if Jesus can use what you have. You have some bread and fish. It doesn't look like a lot. It looks like bread just enough to feed yourself and maybe your friend next to you. Look at this huge multitude. Oh, this will probably never work, but hey, maybe you can help a little bit. But when he brings him to Jesus, look, and I love how he has the hands, how he's encouraging, how he's being tender. It just really shows what we as a church should be doing and how we should be utilizing our young people. Hey, young man, hey, young lady, I noticed you got this talent. Might not seem like a lot. It might not seem like there's much you could do with that. But here, let me take you to Jesus. Because Jesus can take your talents and your gifts and do something beyond your imagination. More than you could ever imagine. As a matter of fact, it was way more than he could imagine. He just thought maybe at least a bite for everybody. Not even enough, he said, but some of them get a few small bites. More than he could imagine, but it's the one that can do unimaginable things for us that he was led to. And what happened? Let's continue reading here. We know the story. Verse 10, Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and the man sat down, about 5,000 of them, right, plus women and children. Verse 11, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and he distributed. Right? Who distributed? Right? He distributed through the disciples. He utilized the disciples to distribute to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, go gather pieces that are left over. And look at this. Let nothing be wasted. And the truth is sometimes, not just in the children and young people, but also amongst adults, our talents are wasted. I'm just being truthful here. I've been in there, I have points in my life where I wasted my talents. And he says, let nothing be wasted. You have these things, you've been given these things, I have a plan for them, utilize them. And we need to be exemplifying this image right here. Everyone rises when we focus on young people. Everybody wins. Not just the young people, but the church as a whole. And I think about this image right here. You saw that picture earlier. Now here's Jesus leading his church to the next place of ministry. And look at the countenance on these disciples. They've been blessed. They were blessed by the participation of this young person. And they can continue to do their ministry. The church in general. Here's things we're going to talk about here real quick. 6 core commitments a church needs to grow young. Unlock keychain leadership. Empathize with today's young people. Take Jesus' message seriously. Fuel a warm community. Prioritize young people everywhere. And be the best neighbor. So I just want to quickly hit some highlights on these things. We don't have time to go in depth. I just want to quickly reference some of these so you guys can have an idea of these basic foundations. And you as a church be considering and thinking about which of these areas you could do a little better. You say, maybe, okay, these we're doing okay. But here, we're kind of lacking a little bit. Let's make some notes here of what we could do as a church, as leaders. Now, here's these things right here listed again, right? It's kind of like a little circle. They're all connected. You typically begin with keychain leadership and kind of start moving through those. Now, let me ask you guys a quick question. They surveyed a bunch of young people, right, in the Seventh-day Adventist church, and they asked them, which of these does your church do well, and which of these does your church struggle a little bit with, or isn't quite strong in that area? So let me ask you guys real quick. What do you guys think the young people said? What was their response, you think, was one that we are good at? What are your thoughts? That's right. Let me see over here. That's what young people said. We study the doctrine. We have Sabbath school lessons. We Pathfinders. They may help us memorize passages, etc. So the young people recognized that as a Seventh-day Adventist church, that was one of our strengths. We do pretty good in comparison to other denominations, in my opinion, in terms of presenting the gospel truth and presenting it faithfully. Now, which one do you think they said? We kind of struggle a little bit with that one, or those two? Best neighbors and empathy today. Young people responded, you know what, our church isn't very empathetic with us. And in terms of our community and how we work with our community, we're not the best neighbors, So the first one here, unlock key chain leadership. Instead of centralizing authority, we need to empower others, new people in the church as well, aside from young people, especially though, however, are young people. Right? This whole element of keys. If you don't have a key, you don't have access, so it's just an idea of authority. It's the idea of empowering, right? Note, if you don't want to develop leaders, just make all the decisions. I found this little funny meme or whatever. A young adult asked the board if he could get a copy of the key. I mean, you get the idea, right? Yeah, it's interesting sometimes. You have a young adult who's 25, 26 years old. He's head of a department in his company that runs $1 million budget, but they can't have the key to the closet of the church that has a vacuum and a couple of things, right? Even though he's a deacon or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say, right? I mean, we can't go the other extreme, but at the same time, we have to be balanced. We have to empower our young people. We have to let them know, hey, this is as much as my church as it is your church. We're in this together equally. You love the Lord as much as I love the Lord. You want to serve as much as I want to serve. So there's 4 types of key leaders. There's leaders, and you can see how you can identify. Don't say anything out here vocally. Just in your mind, you can think about it. Key leaders, these are keyless leaders. These are leaders in your church who have a position but don't really have any kind of authority, don't really have any say. They just kind of have a title in their name. They have that kind of a leadership role. And then there's the key hoarding leaders. It's just an example. I'm using keys as an example, but I think you guys get the idea. We need to get into this location in the church. Oh, okay, can I have the key? Oh, I'll just go. I'll take the key and I'll unlock it myself. Or those that say, well, here's the key, but bring it right back. Right? Bring it right. Okay, hey, where's my key? You loan it, but not quite. And then you have key chain leadership. The type of leadership that says, okay, well, here's the key to this. I'm going to put you responsible. I'll oversee. There'll be oversight, but I can assume that you will be responsible. And you develop up to that point, obviously. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But being able to trust our young people and to give them the opportunity to help us lead our church. Because we're always in need of leaders, aren't we? We're never like, oh, we have enough leaders, we don't need any more. No, we need to grow and develop our leaders because one day I won't be here. And I pray that people are being developed in churches right now that they can take over each and every one of our roles, right? Here's a couple ideas. As a church, you need to identify who is ready for keys, if you know what I mean. Which young people, even kids that are in middle school and high school. I'll tell you the truth. When I was 11 years old, I remember the pastor's wife came up to me and she said, Daniel, could you help me count the Sabbath school money? I was like, okay. So I went that day, and I was very impressed that I was given that opportunity because, there was $10 and $20 bills that I rarely ever got to see. I grew up in as a low-income family. My parents were divorced. We were living with my mom. She didn't have a car. We relied on people to bring us to church, and for me to see $20 bills and $10 bills, and it was mostly change and quarters and nickels, but to say, they gave me the chance, and I was 11 years old. They gave me the chance to count this with them. And she said, at the end of that day, she said, you did a great job. Do you mind if I make you an official Sabbath school money counter? That wasn't the name she gave it, but that's basically what she said. And I was like, me? Like, did I really do that good of a job? And the church actually nominated, and I don't remember the actual title that I had, but they nominated to be that person for the church. And I thought I was like running a Swiss bank or something. I was like, wow. I was kind of impressed. And I did that for that year. The following year, they asked me, and I was 12 years old, they asked me to be a deacon. Now, by this point, I was a baptized member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They didn't ask me to be a junior deacon, like a pretend deacon. They said, you are a deacon. We will train you and teach you to be responsible just like the other adults. So for 3-4 years, I was a deacon. And it was something that I enjoyed. And they gave me certain responsibilities. Said, Daniel, we were using another church. We were using another church's fellowship, so we had to tear down the chairs and everything in their fellowship hall every time we came and left the church. So I had specific roles. Whenever church was over, I was responsible to organizing and put it. And I was 14, 15 years old, and it was my responsibility. By the time I was 17, they were asking me to be, Sabbath school teacher and do this and that, and I was just a high school kid. And today I am preaching before you. Even though, as a kid, I most of you don't know this, but I'm really an introvert. I have a hard time, sometimes if you've taken me out of my pastoral setting and nobody knows I'm a pastor, I'm not the person that's going to start talking. I do that because I'm a pastor and I've learned. But the church took that risk on me. And they gave me all these roles and responsibilities. They didn't just throw them at me. They trained me, and it was slow, and eventually built up to eventually. Believe this or not, I'm not really a singer. When I was 20 years old, I was the music director of our church. And I don't even sing. I don't play any instruments. And I look back, it's like, why would they do that? And when I was done with that year, they wanted me to do it again, but they gave me a couple other options, so I didn't take that one. I took something else. Before I was 23 years old, I had been a head deacon. I had been a Sabbath school teacher, a youth director. I had been in charge of social committee, all these different things. And I didn't fill out of those. I weren't talents that I had. At least I don't think I did. But the church was willing to walk beside me and to help me. They invested in me. They took a risk. And I remember when I went on my first mission trip. I went on a mission trip, actually, I was on my second one. Somebody asked me to preach. They never even seen me preach. Like, why would you do that? But they knew me. They had seen me doing other things, and they worked with me. And I was 22 years old, preaching in another country. At that point, I wasn't a theology student. I hadn't taken any class like that. But again, you have to be able to pass on the keys. Look what it says in Prophets and Keys. And I love this passage. Ministry comprehends far more than preaching the word, right? That's just part of it. It means training young men as Elijah trained Elisha, taking them from their ordinary duties and giving them what? See, giving them responsibilities. It's kind of scary sometimes, folks, I admit. It's kind of scary, but this is what the counsel is, to bear in God's work. Small responsibilities at first, right? And larger ones as they gain strength and experience. Nobody who is baptized in the church should not be given the opportunity to serve. I don't care how young or how old they might be. Right? And it goes, let me see this, another quote. Okay, I'll come back to another quote here in a little bit. Anyway, so empathize with today's young people. In an era in which so many young people feel misunderstood, mislabeled, and unappreciated, churches that are growing young step into their shoes, right? They feel their pain. They bear their burdens. They walk forward, what? Together. Unfortunately, our young people nowadays get the rap, all young people nowadays. Well, how about when you were young? You guys weren't like holy and saints either, right? We got to be able to say, hey, when I was young, I did some very foolish things. And what it would have been like if somebody would have been there to guide me and to lead me to Christ while those things were happening. Right? And the things that our young people have to deal with today and the struggles that they have to face are a little different than the ones you had to face. We need to have compassion with our young people and empathize with them. Will they make mistakes? Yes, you bet they will make mistakes. Some foolish ones. There's this young man. This is a story that I heard from a friend of mine in Dallas. There was this young man who had gone off to college. This is not actual him. I just found another picture, and we'll put a name in there for the sake of protecting the innocent. So Raul had gone away to college. He had grown up in this church as a kid. He had grown there. He was baptized there. That was just where he had grown up as a kid, with his other siblings and his family. And one day he went off to college. He was gone for the whole year. Finally, he was coming back to his home church after being away for an entire year. He was kind of nervous. He was kind of excited at the same time. He just was excited to be at his home church. So before he even gets into the sanctuary, dear precious sister was greeting and says, "Oh, hey, Raul. Wow, you've really gained a lot of weight. I bet you've been eating a lot of pasta and ramen noodles," and went on to give her this little mini message about how she shouldn't be eating pasta. Is there time for that? Yeah, there's times to share the health food message, of course, the health message, of course, and there's right timing and right ways to do it. But instead of saying, "You know what, Raul, we've missed you, give me a big hug, and we're so glad," she went on to sermonize him for about 10 minutes before he even had a chance to get inside of the building. And he said later on, with this other person, says, "I went that day and I just kind of held my tongue, but that day I determined that was no longer my church." Because that lady and another individual had made almost very similar remarks in that sense. Just love the guy. Just hold him. Just let him know that you're happy he's back. Let him know that he's been missed. Like, "Where you been? We've missed you." Instead, it was trying to fix him. And often enough, we don't use this phrase, "I see in you." That's just a letter and acronym to help us remember. But how important it is for us to go to our young people and say, "I see in you someone who could truly bless the church by whatever. I see in you as someone who," and then just go on. And don't make something up. Don't be fake. Get to know that young person and see how you find ways that God can maybe use that person and encourage that person. "I see in you someone who can preach. I've heard you talk, and I've heard you, share the children's story one day, and I think you could be a preacher. I see in you." How much more we need to say that to our young people, our children, our youth, and our young adults. Matthew 9:36, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Sometimes this describes our young adults. Sometimes our high school kids as well. This is the struggles that they're going through. Jesus was saying, here it's talking about Jesus, how he had compassion. He extended his compassion towards us. Oh, and I love this next passage. This one is one that really struck me. We'll read a couple parts here, and then I think later on we'll do the last part. So, Gospel Workers, page 207. Why should not, can't read it on my phone here. Why should not labor for the youth in our borders be regarded as what? Missionary work. And I want to pause there. Sometimes we have a young person that's grown up in our church, and maybe they're not even baptized yet, but because their parents are Adventists and they've been coming since they're little, we make the assumption, "Oh, you should be a real good Adventist." They even hadn't had a chance to make a decision for Christ yet. Or at least they haven't made that step. And it's like when you have a new person or a new believer coming to your church, you give them time, you work with them, you're patient with them, you're loving with them. It should be no exception for our young people, right? It's part of the missionary work, as missionary work of the highest kind, right? The highest kind. And look what it says. It requires the most delicate tact, the most watchful consideration, the most earnest what? Prayer for heavenly wisdom. Because sometimes we just don't know what to say. Some of these questions that our young people ask, we need some wisdom from the Lord. The youth are the objects of Satan's special attacks, but kindness, courtesy, and the sympathy which flows from a heart filled with the love of Jesus, and sometimes that's what's missing in our lives, Jesus, and that's why we can't exemplify these things, right? Let's be honest here. Will gain their confidence and save them from many a snare of the enemy. Powerful. Look what it says continues on saying. The youth need more than the casual notice, more than the occasional word of encouragement. Those things are nice, but then more than just the casual stuff, right? They need painstaking, prayerful, careful labor. He, only whose heart is filled with love and sympathy, so if you ask yourself, is my heart filled with love and sympathy, will be able to reach those youth who are apparently careless and indifferent. Not all can be helped in the same way. Let's recognize that. God deals with each according to his temperament and what? And character, and we must what? Cooperate with him. We must cooperate. we must cooperate. Powerful, isn't that powerful? Take Jesus' message, Sarah, we're just going to quickly touch on here. Instead of asserting formulaic gospel claims, welcome young people into a Christ or a Jesus-centered way of life. Teaching them how to practically live out their Christianity, how Christ can live in them and through them, not so much just pouring upon their heads just doctrine after doctrine. Doctrine is important, amen? And doctrine helps us understand the character of Jesus, but we have to also be practical in teaching them how to live like Jesus, how to practically keep the Sabbath, how to practically eat health. I mean, just in a loving, with sympathy and kindness in the love of Jesus in your heart, ministering to these young people. Growing Young, page 160 says, young people want to know not only what they are saved from, but also what they are saved for. Right? Not just about, oh, the sin is terrible, these things over here are terrible, these things are horrible, but also talk about, this is why you're saved. This is the reason why you're saved. They want to take action, not just hear about what they can't do, right? Participation and challenge are two central features of churches growing young. Fuel a warm community. Instead of focusing on cool worship programs, aim for a warm peer and intergenerational friendships. Notice that? Intergenerational friendships. More than flashy worships, young people want authenticity and connection. And then I put back at the bottom, warm, being a warm church, that's the new cool. Right? That young people can come here and they can say, I love my church. I feel loved. You know, they surveyed all these churches that had been growing young throughout the United States, different denominations, Adventist, non-Adventist, all these different groups. And they asked those young people that were in churches that were growing young, says, what do you like about the church? They said all kinds of stuff, but one of the things that kept coming back time after time is it said, my church feels like a family. My church feels like a family. Fueling a warm community. And this is one of my favorite non-biblical, non-spirit of prophecy quotes. This is by Wes Stanford. Every child, or young person per se, you encounter is a divine appointment. That's powerful. Anytime you have an encounter with a young person, you happen to sit with a young person, you're walking inside, that is an opportunity that God has given you to minister, to reflect Jesus Christ onto that young person. It's a divine appointment. We don't know where our young people are going through. We don't know how it went at school or how they were bullied or how they broke up with their girlfriend or how they've been abused or whatever. They're divine appointments because you have maturity, you have wisdom, you have experience that you can impart on these young people and be a blessing to them that others maybe their age could not. The stronger the relationship you have with young people in your church, the more accepted and effective your counsel will be. If you don't talk to them, if you don't ever say hi, if you've never prayed with them, if you've never shown love to them, and all of a sudden you want to come and correct them, I'm sorry, that's going to turn them off. But if they know that you love them, that you care about them, that you are praying for them, that you are interested, that you miss them when they're not here, and you come to them, it's going to be quite the opposite. They're going to feel like, wow, they care about me. They're concerned about me. So you have to have that relationship with the young people. Number 5, we're getting close to the end here. Hold on, Marvin, you can make it. Prioritize young people everywhere. Instead of giving lip service to how much young people matter, look for creative ways to tangibly support, resource, and involve them. That's the key part, and involve them in all facets of your congregation. Get them involved. Get them in the midst of it. Here's the other part. And when I read this the first time, for me as a minister, it really, you guys know this. I love young people. I love Pathfinders, Adventurers. I love all the kind of youth and children ministry. But I felt even then I wasn't quite meeting the requirements that God was asking of me. This is what it says. Very much has been lost to the cause of truth by the lack of attention to the spiritual needs of the young. Ministers of the gospel should form a happy acquaintance with the youth of their congregations. And it says, many are reluctant to do this, but their neglect is a what? Is a sin in the sight of heaven. Now, we have to recognize that the pastor, the senior pastor, the local pastor of a church isn't the only person who's a minister, right? He might be a full-time ordained minister, but we also, as lay people, we are ministers. We are ministering every week, right? So I don't think this excludes the rest of us. Just a thought there. And the last one, be the best neighbor. Instead of condemning the world outside your walls, enable young people to neighbor well locally and globally. And I love what you guys are doing with God's Closet. That's amazing. That's powerful. Those are the kind of things that you need to continue to expand and to grow and develop in your church, because it's connecting your church. It allows your young people to serve their community. So I applaud and I praise God for that ministry that you guys are supporting here at First Tulsa. And those are kind of things that you need to do more. That's one. Begin another ministry that continues to reach out to the community and allows the young people to be a part of. And look at this. Let's not be a church known for what it is against, but known for what it is for. Right? They don't want to be like, oh, that's the church that's against this or against that group or hates this or hates that. You want to be known for what you're for. We're for being compassionate. We're for loving others and being like Christ. Amen? Last couple slides here as we wrap up. Our efforts to keep our youth should be in conjunction with our overall efforts to grow our church as a whole. In other words, I'm not saying that you should only focus on the young people and only grow them. No. That should be in collaboration with all the other ministries, as we want people here of all ages, of all races, and of all kinds of backgrounds. But we can't exclude the young people from participating in helping us fulfill our three angels' message. We can't exclude them. I want to have this is the last slide that I have, and I want to read this to you. And this is for me, we've read the first part many times. We've heard this first line, but I want to read the whole paragraph here with you. With such an army of workers as our youth, rightly trained, it says. What? Rightly trained. Might furnish how soon the message of a crucified, risen, and soon coming Savior might be carried to the whole world. Do we want Jesus to come back? Are we done and tired with the pain and suffering of this world? Man, right? Training our young people, teaching them, allowing them to be incorporated is part of the process to make this happen. Look what it says, how soon might the end come? The end of suffering and sorrow and sin. How soon, in a place of a possession here, with its blights of sin and pain, our children might receive their inheritance, where the righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever, where the inhabitants shall not say, I am sick, and the voice of the weeping shall be no more heard. I can't wait for that day, friends. The Bible tells me that Jesus died on the cross, that he resurrected on the third day, he was received and now sits at the right hand of power. And we're simply waiting for the day to come when we will all go home. And as I think about that, what a day of rejoicing that will be. What a day of rejoicing that will be. We have to be intentional, friends. We have to be purposeful. We have to plan and stick to the plan. But most importantly, we need to ask that the Holy Spirit be in our lives, that the love of Christ be in us, so that we can reach our young people for the kingdom of God, and not just reach them for the kingdom of God, make them servants of the Lord Most High. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord guide you as you meditate and think about the second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.